There are over 30 weapons in the launch of Black Ops 7 Zombies, so in this video, let's pack-a-punch every single weapon to see what their secret abilities are and which weapons you might want to use next. Starting off with the assault rifles, our first one we're going to be looking at is the M15 Mod 0, which is available to use immediately when you first pick up Black Ops 7 Zombies, and when pack-a-punched, it becomes the Nyx Fall. This increases its ammo capacity by 2 times. It, of course, gets quite a significant damage buff, and one of the other benefits is that the magazine can now be reloaded about 1.5 times faster, even without speed cola. So I'm sure with speed cola combined and the correct augments, this will be a very fast reloading assault rifle. For being available right at the beginning of the game without any level requirements, it's a decent first choice. Moving on to our next weapon, and this is the AK-27, which is unlocked at player level 4. By default, it has 30 rounds in a magazine, but it has a fairly decent fire rate and seems to be a good all-rounder assault rifle to use within zombies. Now, when pack-a-punch, this becomes pretty special because it is called the Impossible Oyster X, which is of course a reference to the impossible Easter egg that was added all the way back in Black Ops 3 Zombies that has still not been solved. So even from that alone, I think this weapon's pretty awesome pack-a-punched. In a magazine, it has 45 rounds by default, and it has a total of 635 rounds total. And overall, it's a fairly decent assault rifle. It's giving me sort of the vibes of the KN-44 from Black Ops 3, which I think this is trying to imitate a little bit, especially when it comes to the name. It isn't game-breakingly good, but I do think it's above average in the rest of the assault rifle class, so I definitely would advise to give it a go. Moving on to our third weapon, this is the MXR-17, and this is unlocked at player level 16. By default, this is a semi-fast firing assault rifle. There is a little bit of a delay for it to be an automatic firing, and when pack-a-punched, this now becomes the Battlement Aside. As expected, this doubles the magazine size, and you also have 600 rounds total. Beyond getting a damage boost, it doesn't seem to really have much of a difference. There isn't any difference in its fire rate, which I would have assumed, and it doesn't feel like a hugely damaging weapon to use inside of zombies. So overall, I don't feel particularly impressed by this weapon. The next assault rifle is the X9 Maverick, which you'll be able to unlock at player level 28. By default, this is a 3-round burst assault rifle that has a fairly fast fire rate, which you'll definitely want to be accurate with in order to maximize its potential. But when it is pack-a-punched, it becomes the Hang X, where it now has 60 rounds in its default magazine, and overall it has 780 rounds total, so quite a lot of ammo here. Similarly to the previous weapon, apart from getting a bit of a damage boost, it doesn't seem like this weapon does a whole lot when it's pack-a-punched. The example shown is this at a green rarity at PAP 1 level at round 20, so it's not the best example. Its pack-a-punch effects don't seem to be overly impressive, so let's move on to the next assault rifle. That being the DS-20 Mirage. This assault rifle is unlocked at player level 37. You can see that it is a fully auto weapon, but the rounds per minute with it aren't particularly fast. When pack-a-punched, it becomes the duality of Blam, but by default with no attachments, it now has 40 rounds in a mag, and it has about 700 ammo in reserve. It appears that the rounds per minute does increase ever so slightly when pack-a-punched, but out the gate, it doesn't seem like an overly impressive or strong assault rifle to use either. The final assault rifle in its class is the Peacekeeper Mark 1. This is a legendary weapon, of course being the return of the Peacekeeper from Black Ops 2. By default, with no attachments, it has 30 rounds in a magazine. Naturally, it has one of the fastest fire rates out of all the assault rifles, and when pack-a-punched, it becomes the Utus Petition, where it has 60 rounds by default and 780 rounds in reserve. So this is a very good all-round assault rifle to be running in zombies. I highly recommend it if you do want to run an assault rifle within zombies, and I think this is available on the wall in certain spots of the map, so I definitely would recommend this. Outside of the higher damage and the increased ammo count, it doesn't seem like this has any other unique pack-a-punch traits. So that's all the assault rifles. Let's now move on to the SMGs. Starting with the Raiden 45K, where when pack-a-punched, it now becomes Sibyl's Sentence, where it has double the ammo as per usual with a max capacity of 720 rounds, but this by default has quite a fast fire rate, and when you pack-a-punch any SMG, especially at close range, you're going to get a damage buff. So this feels like a really good SMG to use in zombies, and this is available immediately. The next SMG is the RK9, which by default has a 3-round burst. It's a bit of a slow-firing SMG, but by default has 40 rounds in a magazine before being pack-a-punched. When it is, it's the Contagion Conductor, where it has 80 rounds in a mag with 560 rounds total. Pack-a-punching it does seem to improve that rounds per minute speed by a little bit. The aim with this weapon is because of that 3-round burst and the slightly slower fire rate, you're going to want to be prioritizing headshots, as that's the way you'll be dealing a lot of damage, as that's the sort of characteristic here with this particular SMG. The next is the Razor 9mm, where when pack-a-punched, it becomes Taniwa's Frenzy, where by default it has 60 rounds in a magazine with 660 in reserve. And this is a fully auto SMG, and when pack-a-punch, it seems the hip fire becomes incredibly tight, allowing you to not really have to ADS, where your bullets are going to stay super accurate even if you are not ADSing. Definitely a useful trait to have with an SMG. The next SMG is the Dravec 45, which is unlocked at level 34. By default, when pack-a-punch, has 60 rounds in a magazine with 600 total reserve. Upgrading it becomes the UPYR 1819. This is a fully auto SMG that has a fairly fast rounds per minute, but it doesn't seem to really get any specific unique pack-a-punch ability when you do throw it in the pack-a-punch, but overall this is a decent SMG. Next SMG is the Carbon 57, which is unlocked at level 46, and by default it has 50 rounds in a magazine, which is pretty decent. This is the Black Ops 7 version of the classic PDW from Black Ops 2, and when pack-a-punched, it becomes the El Cabron, where it has 90 rounds in a magazine and 720 rounds in reserve. As far as SMGs go for the ammo count, this might be one of the highest ammo counts that you can get. It's a very good all-rounder SMG by the looks of things, but when you do pack-a-punch it, doesn't seem to get any unique pack-a-punch benefits, unfortunately. It's hard not to want to jump into zombies and use the PDW, however, and I'm sure when you have a bunch of attachments on this thing, it's going to be really good as an SMG, so definitely want to consider using. The final SMG is the MPC-25, which is unlocked at level 55. This is the Black Ops 7 MSMC. By default, it has 30 rounds in a magazine with around 250 in reserve. It's a really fun SMG to use, of course, and has a fairly decent fire rate, as you would expect from the MSMC. Once you put it in the pack-a-punch, it becomes the Malpractitioner 2500, where by default, it has 45 rounds in a mag with 535 ammo in total. Sadly, it doesn't seem like there is any unique pack-a-punch ability that you get on this weapon when it's pack-a-punched, but it is the MSMC, and it is a very all-round good damage SMG, so I'm very happy that it's in the game, and I definitely think it's something that you could consider, as a blue rarity PAP-1 on round 19 with no perks, is doing a decent amount of damage. Let's now move on to shotguns, starting with the M10 Breacher, which is unlocked immediately. And this is a fairly slow-firing shotgun that by default only has 6 rounds in a magazine. Packs some pretty good damage, but of course we want to put it in the pack-a-punch and see how much better this thing gets. And when it's pack-a-punched, it becomes the X10 SIT Fracture, where it goes from 6 rounds by default to 14 rounds by default and has a total of 84 rounds total. It doesn't seem like there is any unique pack-a-punch ability tied to this weapon, however, but of course it does make it a lot more potent, and it does seem to reload a little bit quicker as well. Moving on to the next shotgun, this is the Echo 12, and this is unlocked at level 22. When pack-a-punch, this becomes the Deja Boom, and it goes from having 12 rounds in a magazine to 24 by default. It's also available on the wall in Van Dorn Farm, which makes it a very useful shotgun to use, and when pack-a-punched, it has a much tighter hip fire spread, even more so if you switch the weapon into tac stance. It feels very similar to the ASG shotgun from Black Ops 6 Zombies, and overall it does put some really decent damage down. So it's definitely a contender in my opinion for the best shotgun in Black Ops 7, but the final shotgun is the Akita, which you unlock at level 40. This thing is absolutely nuts. It has 14 rounds by default, so you'll be reloading very frequently, but it shoots extremely quickly. When pack-a-punch, it becomes the Hatch Eco and has a whooping 42 rounds in its magazine with about 240 rounds total. And I think with attachments, this thing is going to be incredible. This is definitely the equivalent of the Maelstrom from Black Ops 6 Zombies in my opinion. And even though this doesn't get a unique pack-a-punch ability, This thing by default is just insane. I definitely think it's going to be a contender for one of the best weapons in the game, just based on how insane that fire rate is. And on the right attachments to control the hip fire spread and the accuracy, and this thing could be an insane weapon. Moving on to LMGs, there are only 2 in the game so far, starting out with the Mark 78. This LMG is unlocked immediately. By default, it has 75 rounds in a magazine, and it has a fairly fast fire rate. When Pack-a-Punch, this becomes the Meteoric Calamity, and by default, it now has 100 rounds in a magazine with 500 rounds total. What's interesting is that in the beta for Black Ops 7 Zombies, this got a pretty wild Pack-a-Punch ability where you were able to run extremely fast with it and basically have sprint speed whilst you were walking with this, but it seems to have been nerfed significantly in the full game, where it now seems like there isn't actually a Pack-a-Punch ability that you get when you Pack-a-Punch the weapon. The other LMG in the game is the XM325, and this is unlocked at player level 31. By default, it has 60 rounds in a magazine, and it has a much faster fire rate than the Mark 78. And it has a characteristic where it feels a little bit like an AR LMG hybrid. When it's Pack-a-Punched, it becomes Ephilites, and it now has a magazine size of 120 by default, with about 800 rounds total. This, to me, definitely feels like the better LMG to be running in Black Ops 7 Zombies. But when Pack-a-Punch, it doesn't seem like it gets any unique Pack-a-Punch ability, but in terms of fire rate, it's definitely a better LMG choice out of the 2. Moving on to marksman rifles, we have 3. The first one being the M8A1, which is unlocked at player level 10. This is the infamous M8A1 from Black Ops 2, and at its default, it has 32 rounds in a magazine, and it's a 4-round burst marksman rifle by default. When Pack-a-Punched, its magazine by default is now 2 times as big, and the reserve is a lot bigger too. This thing is a really good marksman rifle, and I really think this is a good gun inside of Black Ops 7 Zombies. Again, when it's Pack-a-Punched, it doesn't seem to get any unique abilities, which is a little bit of a shame, especially since it's such an iconic weapon, but overall, this is a very solid marksman rifle. The next is the Warden, and when Pack-a-Punched, it becomes the ET2 Brutus, which is, of course, a spin on the word Warden and Brutus from Mob of the Dead. Very briefly, it only has 16 rounds by default in its magazine, but it does have a lot of damage output for those shots, though it definitely doesn't seem like the strongest marksman rifle that you could use. The final marksman rifle is the M34 Nova line, and this is unlocked at player level 49. This is a weapon kind of similar to the M1 Garand, and when Pack-a-Punch, it becomes the Desecrated Duelist, where by default it has 40 rounds in a magazine with 400 in its reserve. When Pack-a-Punch, this thing has a disgustingly fast fire rate, and that's without even considering double tap. I think this could actually have a place within the meta to be a really strong weapon. It might rival the M8A1 because whilst it doesn't have as huge of a magazine size, it's definitely still very, very good to use. Okay, let's now move into sniper rifles because they're all pretty interesting in the game, and the first one is the VS Recon. This is unlocked immediately and is your classic sniper rifle. It has very, very good damage, but by default, it only has 6 rounds in its magazine. When Pack-a-Punch, this thing becomes the VS Sarah Reconfigurator, and honestly, this is an amazing sniper rifle to use. It gets double the ammo capacity in magazine and overall reserve as expected. When Pack-a-Punched, it now has a much tighter hip fire spread, so if you are running this without a scope on it, you'll be able to use this with much faster movement speed. But outside of that, it doesn't seem to gain any other Pack-a-Punch abilities, sadly. The next sniper rifle is the Shadow SK. This is unlocked at player level 13, and by default, it has 11 rounds in the magazine, and it does seem to shoot a little bit quicker than the previous sniper rifle, feeling a little bit like a Dragunov in terms of comparisons. When Pack-a-Punched, it becomes the Merc Skogsra. These Pack-a-Punch names are absolutely crazy. By default, it has 22 rounds in a magazine, which is absolutely insane. And as you can see, the fire rate of it definitely increases, as well as having a really, really tight hip fire spread. So very similar benefits to the previous sniper, but this one feels even better, and with the right attachments, I think could be fantastic. fantastic. Then the last sniper rifle is the XR3 Ion, which is unlocked at player level 43. This is a very unique weapon because by default it is a 3-round burst sniper rifle which has some insane damage. It's actually one of the highest damage weapons in Black Ops 7 Zombies, and when Pack-a-Punched it becomes the Pandemonium OG. It doesn't get a unique Pack-a-Punch ability, at least it doesn't feel like it. Combined with some of the perks in the game like Elemental Pop with the Napalm Burst ammo mod, Deadshot Daiquiri, it's not shown in the footage, but this has one of the highest damage per second weapons in the entire game. It's absolutely incredible. So whilst it's not exciting Pack-a-Punch, it really does have insane damage. Moving on to pistols, the first pistol is one you unlock immediately, and that is the Jaeger 45. And this is more or less the starting pistol, quote unquote, for Black Ops 7 Zombies. It's pretty much exactly as you'd expect it to be. But when you Pack-a-Punch it, this gets a crazy Pack-a-Punch ability. When Pack-a-Punched, it becomes the Jerry pistol, and this completely transforms the pistol where it is now a glorified shotgun pistol. The ammo in the clip reduces and the fire rate is slowed, but it does emulate a shotgun. As you can see, that crosshair change where it now becomes a much bigger crosshair, a big circular one in the middle of the screen, and it allows you to shoot without needing to ADS. I think if you got this all the way to it being akimbo, this would actually be a very viable pistol choice to use, and I was not expecting this Pack-a-Punch upgrade at all. And even in the slightly later rounds, this is still a very viable pistol to use when it's Pack-a-Punch. The next pistol is the Coda 9, which is essentially the Cap 40 pistol from Black Ops 2. By default, this is a fully auto, very fast fire rate pistol, and you won't be able to use this as a loadout weapon until you hit level 34. When Pack-a-Punched, like most weapons, it has double its ammo capacity and its magazine, and now becomes the No Cap. Because No Cap, this is a very hard-hitting pistol, and I think if you have this in akimbo as well, throw on extended mags, you have a really solid secondary there of just having a ton of ammo to shoot at zombies very, very quick. And the final pistol here is the Velox 5.7. By default, it has 18 rounds in the magazine, and it is a 3-round burst pistol, a little bit like the RK5 from Black Ops 3. When Pack-a-Punch, this pistol is called Ruin, and by default, you have 36 rounds in a magazine, where again, it is still a 3-round burst, but it does seem to have a little bit of a faster fire rate, and the reload does feel a little bit faster, but overall, there doesn't seem to be too much of a noticeable difference in terms of there being a unique PAP ability on this pistol. Moving on to launchers, we have 2 launchers in the game. The first, which is unlocked immediately, is the Arrow 109. This thing is just ridiculous. It is an insane rocket launcher that has 1 shot per magazine, and it just does the most ridiculous amount of damage, but it's so slow to use. And when Pack-a-Punched, it becomes the Ballist Artillery, and I think it's in the name really on what that does. It now becomes an artillery mortar launcher, which is absolutely insane. You still have the 1 shot at a time. Pack-a-Punching it completely transforms this into like an artillery mortar launcher where you need to somewhat aim downwards to compensate for the trajectory, and it adds crazy ADS zoom compared to the non-Pack-a-Punched version. It's definitely a weapon of all time, I will say that. I definitely need to test this a bit more to see just how lethal this could be on high rounds, but it is a very interesting weapon indeed. The other launcher is the Arc M1, which is unlocked at level 25, and this is a very interesting weapon because it has 2 rounds in its reserve, and it's a bit like a energy beam rocket launcher which you need to charge up before firing. When you Pack-a-Punch it, it now becomes Archimedes Insight, where it now has 24 rounds in a magazine, and it completely transforms the weapon when Pack-a-Punched, as you now no longer need to reload that magazine. You can continuously shoot all 24 of those shots at a fairly slow fire rate, but it's like a Spartan laser of sorts that just puts down an insane amount of damage. Definitely a lot more of a viable weapon to use, in my opinion, than the Arrow 109, and very, very interesting to say the least. Moving on to melee weapons, we have 2 in the game so far. The first being the standard knife, which is unlocked immediately for you to use. And it's just a standard knife melee weapon. It's fairly fast in being able to melee. And when Pack-a-Punch, the knife now becomes the Pointed Remark. It's one of those where you definitely want to pair any melee weapon with Melee Macchiato to see just how strong it is. But I guess the real way to tell what is the better melee weapon to use is by how fast you can lunge and melee the zombies. So what you're seeing here is the default speed of them when Pack-a-Punch. So this is the knife. Now we have the Flatline Mark II melee weapon, which is unlocked at level 49. When Pack-a-Punched, it becomes becomes the Ticker Shock melee weapon, and I don't think it really improves that melee speed, so I would definitely use the knife out of the two. And then finally, the last weapons we have in the game are wonder weapons. So of course we have the classic ray gun, and I think we all know what happens when we pack-a-punch this one. By default, it's got 20 rounds and it doesn't have a ton of ammo. And of course, when pack-a-punched, it becomes the Porter's X2 ray gun, where it has double the ammo capacity in its magazine size and has 240 rounds total. When pack-a-punched, it just does more damage and it has more ammo. We all know this, and you will need to combine this with some other perks to really get the potency of the ray gun when it's pack-a-punched, such as double tap, being able to help with the fire rate and increase it. And then lastly, of course, we have the ray gun Mark II, which when pack-a-punched becomes the Porter's Mark II ray gun. I think we know exactly how this goes. And in terms of damage, it's one of the highest damage weapons in the game. So very, very useful to have for the higher rounds, for taking out the Xersa bears, but just everything in general. The only problem is you will run out of ammo with it fairly quickly. It's got 42 rounds in a magazine, about 200 rounds total, maybe a little bit more than that, but it's a fantastic weapon. Now, there is one more wonder weapon in the game, which is the Necro Fluid Gauntlet, but at the time of making this video, the weapon isn't actually live in the game, so I can't show you it, but I will have a video going over this wonder weapon, how to unlock it, how to upgrade it, how it functions, and everything that you need to know. So if you want to check that out, why not click the video that's appearing on your screen right now? But if you want to also see a ultimate guide from a beginner's perspective, then why not also click this video appearing on your screen right now?